What's up, guys? How's it going? Good old Easter Sunday, one of the best days of the year, right? Happy Easter, baby. Happy Easter. It's a great day. It's a great day. And today we are going to be talking about Jesus. And we're going to be talking about the meaning of Easter and why we celebrate Easter and the importance of Easter. And in order to do that, it's gonna probably make you a little bit emotional. Made me a little emotional last service. You can ask some of the kids if you were here last service. And it's because it is a pretty intensive story. And it's a pretty intensive thing on why we celebrate Easter. And so I want to prepare you guys a little bit emotionally for what may be in this message, because it can sometimes cause a little bit of distraught. It might make you a little angry. It might make you a little bit sad. It might make you a little bit frustrated. It might even make your stomach turn a little bit. It might make you feel a little bit disgusted or grossed out a little bit from this message. And that's okay. That is completely okay. But I want to prepare you guys now, just so that you know that this message isn't necessarily the cleanest message. And the story of Easter and why we celebrate Easter, if you were to classify it as a movie, it would probably be an R-rated movie. Matter of fact, it would be an R-rated movie because it is a very intensive story. It is an intensive story on why we celebrate Easter. And we're going to start off by figuring out a couple things. But first, we're going to look into ourselves, okay? And we're going to look at ourselves, and I'm going to ask you a couple questions. And the first one is this. Have you ever murdered anybody before? Any takers? There was somebody last service who said they have. I was a little concerned. Any takers? Any takers? Well, if not, thank goodness, thank the Lord that you have never murdered anybody before. But let me tell you this. Have you ever been angry with anybody before? Have you ever been angry? Have you ever been upset? Have you ever been maybe rageful towards anybody before in your past? I know I have. Well, according to God and according to the Matthew, it says that even if you have been angry or upset with somebody, then you yourself in your heart have committed murder. In your heart. So it's not a physical murder. It's not like you killed somebody physically, but in your heart, you have committed murder because you were angry with them. And so, according to God, if you have been angry with somebody, you've killed. You have committed murder. Secondly, have you ever stolen anything before? Any takers? Anybody's ever stolen anything before? I know I have. I'm not scared to admit it. I've stolen stuff before. And you know what? It doesn't matter how big or how small. If you went full Grand Theft Auto and maybe you stole some dude's Ferrari in like the mall parking lot and you took it for a joyride, or maybe you just stole some money out of your parents' purse, or maybe you decided to pirate a movie off the internet, or maybe you stole something off the internet and you downloaded it for free, even though you were technically supposed to pay for it, right? I know I fell victim to that when I was your age. I don't even know if you guys know what YouTube MP3 is. You guys ever hear of that website? Well, when I was your age, I had a phone and I wanted to get music on it, and I would download it from the internet illegally from YouTube. And that is stealing. It was free, but it wasn't legal and it wasn't right. I was stealing, right? So think in your hearts, think to yourself, have you ever stolen before? You know the answer to that. And third and last is, have you ever lied? Who here's told a lie before? I know if you aren't raising your hand, you yourself are probably lying right now, right? Because every single one of us has told a lie before at some point in our life. And if you've gone your entire life from a newborn baby up until the 12, 13, 14, 15, maybe 16 years of age that you have lived on this planet Earth without telling a lie, good job. I want to congratulate you for that, because that is a huge accomplishment. And so looking at these three things of if you've ever killed anyone before, what would you call somebody who has killed somebody? What would you call somebody who has killed somebody? A murderer, right? A murderer. You'd call them a murderer. What about somebody who has stolen before? What would you call somebody who has stolen before? A thief. And what would you call somebody who has lied? A liar. A liar. And so we'll use myself. I'm not going to choose one of you guys as an example, but we'll use myself. And you can think to yourself this, okay? So if you call somebody who has killed a murderer, and if you call somebody who has stolen a thief, and if you call somebody who has lied a liar, what would I be called? Because I've done all three. A what? A hypocrite? No, not a hypocrite. I would be called a murderous, lying thief, right? Because I have been angry in my heart with somebody. Therefore, I have murdered. I have committed murder within my own heart because I have been angry with somebody before. So according to God, I have committed murder within my own heart. May not be physical murder, but it is that emotional murder. I have committed that murder within my own heart. I have stolen, so I am a thief. I have lied, so I am a liar. So therefore, I am a murdering, lying thief, okay? And I give you all full permission to call me a murdering, lying thief. If you go home and you say, Mom, Dad, Pastor Jordan said that he's a murdering, lying thief, they're going to probably email me and ask what I was talking about today. But it is true. I am a murdering, lying thief. And most of us, all of us, are probably murdering, lying thieves because we've probably all done all three of those. And so looking back of why are we murdering, lying thieves, right? Looking back in history, how did we get to the point where we are murdering, lying thieves? Well, to figure that out, we need to go all the way back to the beginning, to when Genesis was taking place. And that is when God is creating the heavens and the earth. And in Genesis 1, it talks about how he developed and he made the heavens and the earth, and he also created man. And man was created to fellowship with God. He was created to love God and love one another. However, God gave man a simple rule, and they chose to be deceived by a serpent, chose to be deceived by Satan, chose to be deceived by the devil, and fell into the devil's temptation, and he tricked them into what? Disobeying God. Disobeying the one thing that God asked them not to do. And that sent the rest of mankind into a downward spiral of sin. Then the world had sin enter into the world, and then therefore God banished Adam and Eve. He exiled them out of the garden. He exiled them. He said, you are no longer welcome here in this holy place. You have lied, you have deceived, you disobeyed the one thing I asked you to do. And so he exiled them out of the garden. And outside of the garden is the dirt, is the thorns, is the spigots, is the things of the world, is sin, is wickedness, right? God created man from the dirt. And man will go back to the dirt when we die. And we are all murderous, lying thieves. And we deserve the punishment of death. We deserve that. God created us. We are his creation. And we are wicked by nature. We are evil by nature. We're sinful by nature. We fall into temptation, sadly, sometimes so easily. And other times we can hold our ground and we can try and do it. But if you try and go about it alone, you will fall into that temptation. You will fall short. And we are all murdering, lying thieves. I am a murdering, lying thief. Okay? And now that they have been banished, they have been exiled from the garden, there's another plan in place. God wants to reunite with us. He wants us to be in a relationship with him. He wants us to be able to find our peace and come to him and follow him and just be in a relationship with him. And we couldn't do that because we were exiled out of the garden. And so he had another plan in place. And that plan was a little wild. It was a little crazy. And it was something that only God, the all-loving, merciful God, would do and could do. And he realized that there was all of these laws that were put into place that we could not fulfill, that we could not follow, that we just could not live up to because we were sinful by nature. And so he himself saw this, and he himself saw that there was no way that we were going to be able to fulfill those laws, that we were going to be able to live a perfect life. And so he came down in the human flesh. He sent his son, Jesus Christ, to come down to this earth. And it says in John 1:1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Jesus Christ, I think I broke that. Jesus Christ was in the world, was with God when he created the world. Good thing I had my boot on because that could have really hurt. But Jesus Christ was with God when the world was being created, when he created mankind, and he came down to earth because he recognized we were failing. He recognized there was no way that we could live to perfection. We could live to sustain and live by God's laws. We were failing. Mankind was failing. And God felt for us. And the crazy thing is God didn't have to do this. God has the power to be able to just wipe us all out like that. He has the ability to be wrathful. He has the ability to be angry if he wanted to. He has the ability to just clean us out like a clean slate. But he loves us. He loves every single one of us so much. He loved those who have lived. He loved those who are living now. And he loves those who are going to be living. He loves the world. He loves his creation. He doesn't want to destroy it. And he has the power to do so. And he demonstrated that. He flooded the world once before, but he promised to never do that again because there were people that were still choosing to pursue him. People who were still failing, but were choosing to do their best to pursue God. And he recognized that. And he said, I want to have a relationship with them. I want to have a relationship with you. I want to have a relationship with the person on your left, the person on your right, everybody in the world. And so he himself came down in the flesh. He came down to the world. And it says in John 1:14, it says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and full of truth. He did this out of his grace. He did this because he was truthful. He promised to never flood the earth again. He promised to not destroy mankind. He is a truthful God. He does not lie. He does not deceive. And he does it because he loves you. He came down to this earth because of his grace and because he wanted a relationship with you. And so out of his grace and out of his trustworthiness, he came and stepped into the world. And he did many things while he was here on the earth. He did many things. He spent his time with children, loving upon children, teaching them, growing them. He spent his time teaching to thousands. He fed thousands. He healed the sick. He healed the injured. He healed people who did not deserve being healed. He even broke down cultural barriers and went out of his way to talk to the people that normal people wouldn't talk to. People that were hidden, people that were often thought of as disgusted or sinful or wicked and shouldn't be talked to. They should be thrown into prison. They're going straight to hell. And he went out of his way to talk to them. Despite their brokenness, despite their wickedness, despite their sin, despite the mistakes they made, he went an extra mile out of his way to go to them, realizing that they were broken. And broken people need healing. Broken people need love. Broken people need compassion. And that's exactly what he did here on earth. He brought that to earth. He brought that to them. He met people where they were at. And he just said, follow me. Follow me. Despite your brokenness, despite your mistakes, despite the things that you have done or will do, follow me. I love you. And I'm here for you. I want to help you. Follow me. And in 1 Peter, it demonstrates this. It says he committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. During his time here on earth, many people would agree with this passage that in 1 Peter that he committed no sin. It is found throughout the entire Bible. Jesus lived that perfect life. He did not lie. He did not murder. He did not even commit murder within his own heart. He was never angry or wrathful towards another human, towards another man. He was not deceitful. He wasn't a liar. He was honest. He was truthful. He was merciful. He was humble. He was compassionate. He was loving. He lived a perfect life. He made no mistakes. He made no errors. And he did it because he loves you. And he knows the things you've already done. He knew the things that you would do before you even did them. Because he's an all-knowing God and an all-powerful God and an all-loving God. One other thing that he did while he was here on this earth was select a couple disciples, a handful of people to just follow him. And he poured into these people, teaching them, educating them how to properly understand and comprehend what God has placed before them, to comprehend and understand the love of Christ, and that there is so much misunderstanding, so many things that were being taken out of context and just were not comprehended correctly. And he set them on a path to be able to go out into the world, to be able to preach to the thousands, to be able to share the gospel, share what God has done, share what God is going to do, and how he's going to do it. He poured into these disciples. And he's still pouring into everybody today. He's still able to teach you. He's still able to grow you. You're able to become more wise. Because he's there. He's there for you. And the power of the Holy Spirit can help guide you and shape you into who he needs you to become. He understands you're broken. He understands you've made mistakes. He understands that you may be lost. But he's there for you. The same way he was there for his disciples. And he's there to teach you and educate you the same way he was there for the disciples. And while he was with his disciples, he had a couple things that, three times, that he tried to warn them for what was about to come. The first one is found in Mark 8:31. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and may be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed again and rise after the 3 days. He told them, the first time he told them what needs to happen. He told them that he's going to be taken into custody, that he is going to be rejected by the teachers, by the chief priests, by the Pharisees, the ones who the Jews looked up to as religious leaders. He was going to be rejected by them, and he was going to be taken into custody. And then he must be killed, and after 3 days he will rise again. He tells them that the first time. And then he tells them again in Mark 9. He says, because he was teaching his disciples, he said to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. But they did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it. So he tells them a second time. He realized they didn't understand it the first time. They didn't know what I was talking about. He tells them again a second time. He tells them exactly what's going to happen. That he will be delivered into the hands of men and will need to die, but he will rise again. He's like, it's okay, I promise, I will rise again. The Son of Man will rise again. But they didn't understand. They didn't understand what he meant, and they were too afraid to ask him. And sometimes in your own life, you're going to be too afraid to ask questions. I encourage you to take a step of boldness, take a step of bravery, and be able to ask those questions. Because the disciples had the best teacher that has ever lived this planet. The best teacher that ever was and ever will be. They had them to their disposal to be able to ask him anything, and they were too afraid to ask what he meant. And then he tells them a third time, knowing that they still didn't understand, saying, we are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and they will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him, and 3 days later he will rise. He tells them exactly what's going to happen this time. He says, I will be delivered, and then I will be spit on. I will be rejected. I will be flogged. But it's okay. I'm going to rise again. I'm coming back. I promise. But they still didn't understand. They still didn't comprehend what he meant. But then that time came. They were heading to Jerusalem, and that time came. And they would go to a place that Jesus often would go to. He would often take his disciples to. And they would talk, and they would communicate, and they would fellowship, and they would pray. And he would often go off on his own to spend one-on-one time with God and praying and reuniting himself to God and realigning his life to him and being able to just spend time in God's presence. And he goes there. And he's with his disciples, and he tells his disciples, you stay here. Don't fall asleep. You stay here. Don't fall asleep. And I'm going to go and pray. And it says this, he was walking away, going a little further. He fell to his face to the ground and prayed. He fell to his face. He fell down to the ground. He knew what was coming. He'd already told his disciples 3 times what was going to happen. One of the times was on his way to Jerusalem, and now they're there. Now it's coming, and the time's coming. And he falls to his face because he knows that time is near. He knows it is coming. He is human. He was human. He was God in the flesh. He took upon flesh. And so he felt those emotions. He was probably scared. He was probably nervous. He was probably worried about what was going to happen. But he prays to God through it all. He falls to the ground, prays, saying, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." At your will. I think that's a typo. At your will is what it should say. At your will. Not my will, but your will. He says, "God, if there is any other way, if there is any other way where I don't have to endure this suffering, where I don't have to go through this pain, through this agony, and this physical pain, if there's any other way, please take it away from me and let me do that other way. Let me go that other path. But Lord, if there is no other way, if this is what I must endure, if this is what it must be, then let it be done. Then let it be done. I'm willing to follow you. I'm willing to follow your path. I'm willing to follow your will." And he walks back over to his disciples who fell asleep, even though he told them not to, and tells them to wake up and begins talking to them, explaining that they should be praying and that the time is near. And then a group of men come in, some Roman guards, some high priests, some officials. They come in and they surround Jesus and they surround the disciples and they begin to ask Jesus, "Are you the Jesus of Nazareth? Are you Jesus of Nazareth?" And Jesus says, "Yes, I am he. Yes, I am he." And they ask him again, "Are you Jesus of Nazareth?" "Yes, yes, I am he." And I think that they were caught off guard a little bit because they were there to take him into custody, but he was so willing. He was just said, "Yes, I am he," the second they asked. Usually a fugitive, usually somebody on the run wouldn't necessarily just be like, "Yeah, that's me, go ahead, take me away. That's me." But he did. And so I think that they were caught off guard a little bit, and they asked him again to confirm, "Are you Jesus of Nazareth?" And he says, "Yes, yes, I am he." But his disciples were scared. He was ready to go. He was willing to go, but his disciples were scared. They were scared for what was about to happen to Jesus because they knew that Jesus was their Lord, that Jesus was the Messiah, that Jesus was the one that they had been waiting for thousands of centuries. They've been waiting for the Messiah to come. And he's finally here. And now he's going to be taken captive with the Romans. They didn't want anything to happen to Jesus. They didn't want anything to happen to their Messiah. And so one of the disciples leaped out and slashed with their sword a man's ear clean off. He cut his ear. And Jesus says this. He says, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed it. And so the man who was part of a group that had come to take Jesus into custody, that had come, and Jesus knew, come to take him to his death. A man that was part of that group, a servant that was part of this group, had his ear cut. And Jesus recognized that he was in pain, that he was hurting. And Jesus was so full of love, so full of compassion, that even though he knew that man was going to help lead him to his death and help take him into captivity, he walks up to the man, tells his disciples, "Enough of this. There's no reason to fight." Walks up to a man and heals his ear. That there itself defines who Jesus was. He knew he was going to die. He knew he was being led to his death. He knew that that man was assisting in taking him into custody, yet he still healed him. And it is because Jesus is all loving. Jesus is compassionate. And he recognized he was in pain the same way he recognizes that we ourselves are often in pain. And he's there for you. And he wants to heal you. He wants to mend you. He wants to grow you. He wants to be there for you. And he tells Peter this. He says, Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" And he heals the man. He tells Peter, he says, "Look, put this sword away. There's no more fighting. There's no need for this." Like he recognized that he was just barely praying to God, saying, if there was any other will, let me do that. But if not, God, I will follow your will. I will bear this cup if it is your will, if it is what you need to happen. Let it happen. And moments later, it's happening. And Jesus recognized this. He realized that God had a plan, and this was the will that he must take upon. This is the the pain that he must go through and endure. And so he chooses to follow God's plan. And he sets an example for his disciples saying, look, I'm going to follow the will of my Father. And he asks it in a question saying, shouldn't I follow the will of my Father? So Peter was probably caught off guard, because I know if I was asked that question, I'd be caught off guard to myself thinking, yeah, you should. You should follow the will of your Father. The same way I should be following the will of my Father. I should be following the will of God that God has for my plan, for my life. So Jesus is taken away. He's taken into custody, and they take him to a high priest. And in the high priest's prison, it says this is what the guards were doing to him. It says, the men who were guarding Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded, prophecy, who hit you? And they said many other insulting things to him. And so as Jesus was in custody, as he was locked up, the guards who were guarding Jesus began to beat him and began to mock him. They blindfolded him and began to say, which one of us hit you? If you're really God, if you're really the one that you say you are, if you're really God in the flesh, if you're really the Messiah we've been waiting for, you should be able to tell us which one of us hit you, because you are all-knowing. So, which one of us hit you? Which one of us was it? Mocking him. And then he was sent away. He was sent over to a man named Pilate, who is a Roman official, and he was sent over to this man, and he's being talked to by Pilate, and Pilate asks him if he was Jesus of Nazareth, and he says, yes, I am. And he says, are you the king of the Jews? And he says, if that is what you call me, if that is what they call me. And Pilate began to ask him why he was in this position. And Pilate was a little caught off guard by Jesus' response. And he said, do you not realize that I am the one who has the authority to be able to lock you up or sentence you to your death or free you? Do you not realize that I am the one who has the authority to do that? And Jesus says this, he says, you only have that authority because my Father in heaven gave you that authority. You only have that power because my Father in heaven gave you that power. And it was then that Pilate realized that this man is innocent. This man is innocent. He is simply following the will of his Father. He's following the commands of God. And then Pilate doesn't want him. He says, you're out of my jurisdiction. And sends him to a man named Herod, another Roman official, because he's a Galilean. And so he's not part of Pilate's jurisdiction. Sends him over to Herod, and Herod's thrilled to have Jesus, because Herod has heard about all the miraculous things that Jesus has done. He's heard about the wonderful miracles that Jesus has performed, all of the wonderful teachings that he's taught. He's heard about him turning loaves and fishes and feeding thousands. He's heard about the amazing things that Jesus has done and how loving and compassionate he truly is. And he was speaking with Jesus, and they did the same thing. They beat him and they mocked him. But still they found him innocent. They found him innocent according to Roman law. And he said, you're innocent, and sent him back to Pilate. And so Pilate has Jesus once again, and he's talking to Jesus, saying, look, I have this authority to free you, to help you. But then he goes out and he talks to the people, but then the people begin to shout, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. They're so filled of anger. They're so filled of rage because the religious leaders were egging it on, saying this. One more slide. The next slide. Saying the Jewish leaders insisted we have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claims to be the Son of God. The Jewish leaders were saying, look, we have a Jewish law, and according to Jewish law, he's claiming to be the Son of God. He's claiming to be the Messiah when he clearly isn't. So therefore, he must die. And they were wilding the crowd up. But then Pilate wanted to try and calm them down, and he says, look, every year, it's the Passover right now, and every year during Passover, I free one prisoner for you. Would you like me to free this man? Would you like me to free this innocent man, this innocent Jesus of Nazareth? Would you like me to free him for you? since it is the Passover. But they once again begin to shout, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. And then they wanted to have Barabbas freed. They wanted to have a man named Barabbas, and they began to shout, free Barabbas. And so Pilate had no choice other than to free Barabbas. And Barabbas was a murderer. He was in prison for committing murder. And one can assume that a murderer is also a liar. A murderer may also be a liar. So therefore, he was a murdering, lying thief. No different than I, no different than many of us. He was somebody who was sinful, somebody who was wicked, somebody who fell into temptation of the world. So I couldn't even imagine the thought of being in Barabbas' position, knowing that I am guilty for a pretty dark crime. Yet this innocent man, because of him, I am being set free. I am no longer bound to my chains. And Pilate gives them Jesus, and they take Jesus, and they take him, and they begin to beat him, mock him, spit on him, place a crown of thorns upon his head, and they give him his cross to carry up a hill, not towards a straight slope, not downwards, but up a hill, carrying a heavy cross in which he would be placed on. And when he gets to the top of the hill, and there's two other men that are up, two other criminals that are up on each side, and they lay him down, lay the cross down and lay him down on top of it, and they drive nails through each of his hands and drive nails through his feet. And the guards strip him of his clothing, and they begin to split it up amongst themselves and take it in for themselves. He's not going to need it anymore. He's going to die. So we're going to take his belongings. And then they hang him up in the air for everybody to see. An Old Testament prophecy, Old Testament says that the Son of Man will be beaten so badly, you will not even be able to tell that he is a man. And so he's hanging up there, so beaten, spit on, in pain and agony, between two criminals who deserve this death because of the crimes in which they've committed. And one of the criminals begins to talk to him, and he begins saying, if you are truly God, if you are truly the Messiah, then get yourself down. If you are truly God, if you are truly the Messiah, get us down from here. Because you are almighty. I've heard about you. I know about you. If you are who you say you are, you have the power to get yourself down. So do it. And he's egging him on. And the other criminal on the other side of him begins to say, you fool, speaking to the other criminal, you fool. If this truly is God, if this truly is the Messiah, he is an innocent man. And he is receiving the same punishment in which we're receiving. He's receiving that same punishment in which we are actually guilty of. But he himself is innocent. And he looks over to Jesus and he says, remember me when you are in heaven. Remember me when you enter your Lord's kingdom. When you enter God's kingdom, remember my name. He's apologizing. He's asking for forgiveness. He's saying, Lord, Lord, remember me. He's not saying, let me come to heaven with you. He's saying, remember me. He may be thinking, I don't know what crime exactly he did, but he may be thinking, I'm deserving of this, and I'm deserving of the punishment of hell, of the wrath of hell, of the absence of God. But Lord, remember my name in heaven. And God looks over to him and says, I today will say that you will join me today in paradise. He looks over to this man who's hanging on a cross, who is guilty of his crime, who couldn't do anything. He couldn't go out into the world and apologize to the people he harmed. He couldn't go out into the world and apologize to maybe the people that he stole from. He couldn't go out into the world and become baptized. He couldn't go out into the world and tithe a certain amount. He couldn't go out into the world and perform good deeds and good works. He couldn't go out into the world and teach that Jesus is Lord, that Jesus is King, that Jesus is Messiah. He was stuck, nailed to the cross, couldn't move. And because of Jesus' grace, because of his love, because of that compassion, and because of what he was doing, the laws that he was fulfilling, he was able to look over to him and say, today, not a decade from now, not a year from now, not 10, 20, 30 years from now, not a lifetime from now, but today you will join me in paradise. And then Jesus looked up, said, it is finished. It is finished. And he bowed his head and breathed his last breath. And the Romans, they wanted to make sure that the people on the crosses, the criminals on the crosses, would die before the Passover because they didn't want their bodies hanging for all to see during the Passover, which is a holy holiday. And so he sent Roman officials to go and break their legs while they're up on the cross to speed their death up, to ensure that they will die before the Passover. But when they got there, they noticed that Jesus was already dead. And everybody in the crowd, everybody that was there, witnessed that Jesus was dead up on this cross. Jesus' mother was even in this crowd as Jesus was being hung up on the cross, and all of this has happened. But to confirm he was dead, they took a spear and they jabbed it in his side, in which blood and water spilled out, which confirms that Jesus was dead, that he died up on that cross. And it is important to know that Jesus did, in fact, die up on that cross. And we can know that because those Roman officials were tasked and were bred and were trained to be professional killers. They did it for a living. If they did not ensure that those who they were in charge of killing were not killed, they themselves would endure that same punishment, and they themselves may be sentenced to death, and their families may be sentenced to death. So those Roman officials, those professional killers, ensured that these criminals, that Jesus Christ was dead on that cross before they brought him down and sent him to his tomb, to his grave. And now Jesus is lying in his grave. He's there. Our Messiah, our Lord, our King, our God is lying there to rot. He's lying in a tomb after having a death that he did not deserve. 3 days came around, and Mary's going up to go and visit Jesus. And she gets up to this tomb and realizes that it's empty. But she sees two individuals, one at the head and one at the foot of where Jesus was lying. But Jesus was missing. And she begins to cry. She begins to feel that sorrow, begins to feel that sadness, and her eyes fill up with tears. And they ask her, "Woman, why are you crying? Woman, why are you crying?" She said, "I don't know where they took him. I don't know where they took Jesus. I don't know where they took my Lord, where they took God." And she notices a man behind her, and she mistakes him for a gardener. And she says, Sir, if you know where they took my Lord, if you know where they took Jesus, please tell me. I must know where they took him." And all he says to her is, "Mary." The Son of God, the Son of Man, he's risen. It was him. And he says to her, "Mary." And she realizes that it is Jesus Christ, that he is risen. And it all begins to make sense that he was saying that he will rise again on the third day. And Jesus Christ is risen. He's alive. He's well. He's alive again. And she runs off to go tell the other disciples. She tells the disciples, and they begin to race up to her, up to the tomb. And they get up to the tomb, and they themselves witness that the tomb is empty, and they believe. But there was one disciple who did not believe that Jesus Christ was risen again. He said, "I must see Jesus. I must see him with my own two eyes, and I must feel his scars on his hands. I must feel his scar on his abdomen and a scar on his feet, and I must physically see him." And Jesus, he made that happen. He was speaking with all the disciples, and he came through the locked doorway, and he speaks with all of his disciples, and Thomas is there, and he gets the opportunity to feel the scars on his hands from the nails, to feel the scar on his abdomen, feel the scar on his feet, and be able to see physically that it is Jesus Christ, that it is the Messiah, alive and well once again. And it's important to know that Jesus died on that cross. And we can know that because the Roman officials were professional killers. But it's important to know that Jesus rose again. And we can know this in a couple different ways. We can prove that this is a fact, and this isn't just some theological belief that people have. This is a historical fact. Looking back in ancient history, women were not a credible resources. They were not a credible witnesses in that time period. And so if they wanted to elaborate a lie, if the disciples wanted to make something up, maybe take the body and go and hide it for themselves and tell the world that Jesus was alive, well, once again, when really he was not, if they wanted to create this elaborate lie, they would not have started it by telling the world that a woman found Jesus' empty tomb, because a woman was not an credible witness. And another way that we can know this is that every single one of those disciples went out into the world. They went and preached to the world and spread the gospel, proclaiming with their mouth that Jesus is Lord and that he is our God, that he is all merciful, that he is loving, sharing the teachings in which Jesus had taught them while he was here with them. And every one of those disciples that went out into the world to do just that suffered a brutal death because of their belief in Jesus Christ. Now, it's not confirmed exactly how all of the disciples were killed, but some say that some of them were beheaded, some were hung up on a cross, some were hung on a cross upside down because they did not see themselves as worthy of having the same death as Jesus. We do not know the exact way all of the disciples died, but we know that they all died because of their belief in Jesus Christ. And because of their belief in Jesus Christ, they went to the extent of dying for their beliefs, because they knew that there was a God, that there was a Messiah who came down to the earth because he loved them. No matter the mistakes that they would make, no matter the sin that they have, no matter the things that they've done in their past or are going to do in the future, they know that there is a God who is almighty, that there is a God who is all powerful, that there is a God who loves you. And they went to the extent of dying on that belief that Jesus had rose again from that grave. And because Jesus rose again from that grave, we are able to celebrate. We're able to celebrate the wonderful gift that God gives us, which is his mercy, which is his grace. The grace of knowing that we are murderers, we are liars, we are thieves, we do make mistakes, we do mess up, we do sin. Every single one of us does. The person to your left, the person to your right, I myself. We're sinful creatures. But God is pursuing you. God is chasing after you. God is coming for you because he wants a relationship with you. He went through all of that pain. He went through all of that suffering for you and for the person to your left and the person to your right, the people who have lived, the people who are going to live. He did it for the world. And he did it out of love so that we could be welcomed into an eternal life, an eternal presence with God. And it's the best gift that we could ever receive. It's his grace. And so I ask you guys this. Jesus asks us to believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. You will be saved, for it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. And so I ask you guys this. Do you believe in Jesus in your heart? Do you believe in him? Do you believe that he did this for you? Do you believe he did this for the world? Do you believe in him? Do you want a relationship with him? Do you believe that in your heart? And the next thing I would ask you guys is, will you declare that with your mouth? Will you go out into the world and declare with your mouth and profess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, that Jesus is Messiah, that he is our God, and he loves you, he loves everyone, and spread that message that he is risen, that he is alive, and he's there for you. He's there for the broken. He's there for the sick. So I'm going to ask you guys to just bow your heads for just a moment. Bow your heads for just a moment and just sit in silence for just a few moments. And I'm going to pray. And at any time while I'm praying, if you feel inclined that you want to take that step today to profess your faith in Jesus and declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, that he is King, that he is God, that he is all merciful, and that he is gracious, and that he loves you, and you want to join into a relationship with him, anytime during this prayer, I ask that you raise your hand and let that be known. And if not, you're not ready to do that, keep it in your heart. But Lord, so thankful for you, so thankful for your love, so thankful for your mercy, so thankful for your grace. Lord, thankful for the brutal death in which you endured, the pain that you had to endure. Lord, I'm thankful for the love in which you have for us. And Lord, I want to pray over every single one of these students today. I want to pray over them if they have made that decision to follow you and they've joined into a relationship with you. Lord, I want to pray for them that they will have the strength and they will have the courage and they will have the motivation to be able to continue on in their everyday life, that their faith will not diminish, that you will be there for them, that you will be the light in their life, and that you can provide them with comfort and peace, and that you can grow them and shape them into the man or woman that they will become to bring glory to your kingdom. And God, I pray for those who are broken. I pray for those who are lost. I pray for those who have not yet discovered your love, who have not yet discovered your mercy. Lord, I pray for these students that their hearts will be softened and that their minds will be open and that they'll be able to realize that you are there and that they'll be able to have the courage and the bravery to step into that relationship when they are ready. Lord, we love you so much. In your name, amen. All right. Okay, guys, we have a couple bags for you in the back, a gift for everybody to take home, okay? And if you want it to stay back for prayer or anything, a couple of us leaders will stay back for you, okay? But other than that, go ahead, grab your gift, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a wonderful Easter.